I collapsed in the kitchen. No one came. A month later, no, let me go back. It was a Sunday afternoon. My husband Michael was in the garage, probably working on one of his tools he never actually used. Our daughter Natalie was in her room, with the door closed, blasting some reality show I could hear through the floorboards. Our son Brandon was downstairs, gaming as usual, yelling into his headset like he was being paid for it. I was in the kitchen making dinner. Again. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. I remember the exact moment it happened. I had just reached for the top shelf to get the paprika for the roast. My fingers barely touched the lid when the world tilted. Not slowly. Fast. My knees buckled, my head spun, and the spice bottle hit the floor before I did. I heard the sharp thud of my body hitting tile. Then silence. No footsteps. No one came running. No one asked if I was okay. The silence stretched into minutes. I laid there, on the cold floor, heart racing, chest tight, arms limp by my side, staring up at the ceiling fan that kept spinning, completely indifferent to the fact that something had just happened. I don't know how long I was out. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. When I opened my eyes again, the light in the kitchen had shifted slightly. The roast was burning in the oven, and smoke had started to slip through the corners of the door. The house remained quiet, except for the usual sounds: Brandon screaming into his game, Natalie's TV, and Michael's occasional cough from the garage. I pulled myself up slowly, leaning against the cabinet for balance. My legs were trembling, and I felt sweat under my arms, despite the chill of the tile. I turned the oven off. I washed my hands. I didn't say a word. At dinner that night, no one asked why the roast was overcooked. No one asked why I wasn't eating. No one noticed the faint bruise on my temple or the stiffness in my back. I tested them the next morning. I left the laundry baskets full. I didn't refill the cereal containers. I didn't sweep the entryway like I usually did before work. Nothing. No comments, no questions. It wasn't that they didn't care. No, actually, maybe it was exactly that. Maybe they didn't care because they had forgotten how, or maybe I had let them forget. I stopped packing their lunches. I stopped folding Michael's undershirts into neat piles. I stopped reminding Brandon to charge his school tablet and Natalie to take her iron pills. It took 5 days before anyone noticed. Michael came into the kitchen that Friday morning and stared at the empty counter where his lunch used to be waiting. "You didn't pack my food?" I looked at him. No. He blinked like I'd just spoken in another language. "Why not?" I didn't feel like it. He scoffed and opened the fridge. "Fine, I'll grab something." That was it. No follow-up. No concern. Natalie noticed. Next. Sunday morning, she opened her pill box and saw it still full from the week. "Mom, did you forget to refill this?" "No." Then, "Why didn't you?" I kept washing the dishes. "Mom?" "I didn't refill it, Natalie. You're old enough to keep track of it yourself." She didn't say anything else, just walked away. By the following Tuesday, I had stopped doing everything. I still woke up early. I still made coffee. But I stopped moving through the house like a ghost in service to everyone else. And I started watching. Closely. I watched Brandon yell that the house was out of his favorite cereal and stomp out of the kitchen like someone had betrayed him. I watched Natalie complain about her wrinkled jeans because no one had done laundry. I watched Michael order takeout 3 nights in a row and blame his stomach problems on cheap food. No one asked where I'd been, what I was doing, why things had changed. The house didn't fall apart immediately. It decayed slowly. Dishes piled up. Towels remained damp in the washer. The trash smelled like something had died. But no one lifted a finger. It was like they were all waiting for the air to fix itself, for the invisible hands that cleaned and folded and prepped and refilled to magically return. They still hadn't realized I was the hands. I had always been the hands. 2 weeks after the kitchen incident, Michael sat down next to me on the couch one evening, like nothing had changed. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. "I'm fine," I said. "You've been different." I looked at him. "I fainted in the kitchen 2 weeks ago." He paused. "What?" "I passed out. Hit my head. You were in the garage. No one came." Michael leaned back like I'd accused him of a crime. "You didn't tell me? You didn't ask. That's not fair." I folded my arms. "Neither is being invisible." He stood up and left the room. The next morning, there was a sticky note on the fridge. "We need to talk. Tonight. All of us." When I came home from work, they were waiting at the kitchen table. Michael, Brandon, and Natalie. Like a tribunal, Natalie spoke first. "You've been acting weird." "Because I stopped doing everything for you?" Brandon crossed his arms. "You didn't even buy snacks this week." "I used to faint and still cook dinner. I stopped fainting. I stopped cooking." Michael sighed. "Look, we're not trying to fight. We just want to know what's going on." I pulled out a chair and sat down. "You want to know what's going on? I'll tell you." I collapsed on the kitchen floor and no one noticed. No one cared. I did laundry with a migraine. I shopped while my joints ached. I packed your things, folded your clothes, restocked your lives while mine sat empty. Brandon shifted in his seat. Natalie looked away. I stopped. I continued. "And not because I'm angry. I stopped because I realized if I disappeared, you'd just order takeout and complain the Wi-Fi was too slow." Michael frowned. "We're not that bad." I looked him in the eyes. "Aren't you?" Silence. And I stayed silent too. Because this time, I wanted them to sit in it. And that silence. It wasn't even the hardest part. The silence after that. Family meeting didn't lead to change. It led to distance. I kept waiting for an apology, for some sense of awareness, for someone in that house to admit they had failed me. But no one did. After that night, they all retreated, each in their own way. Michael went back to staying late at work, or at least that's what he told me. Most nights, he walked through the door around 8 p.m., nodded, and went straight to the den. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't even ask what was for dinner, because he already knew there was nothing. If he was hungry, he ordered food and ate it in silence. Natalie became passive-aggressive. She'd drop empty milk cartons back in the fridge, leave her towels on the floor, and roll her eyes whenever I walked into the room. At dinner, on the rare occasions we shared a table, she'd sigh loudly, push her food around like a toddler, and leave halfway through the meal. Brandon did the least, which was typical for him. He didn't even pretend to engage. He existed in a world of screens and wireless headphones. Occasionally, he'd text me from downstairs with requests: food, money, laundry. I stopped replying. The house had turned cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. No one spoke unless absolutely necessary. We became 4 strangers sharing one roof. 3 weeks after that conversation, I finally did something I had been putting off for years. I made a list. A simple one. A list of every task I used to do for each of them. I didn't exaggerate. I just wrote it plainly. It took 3 full pages. Laundry, folded and sorted. Towels refilled. Groceries bought and put away. Fridge cleaned. Dishwasher loaded and unloaded. Bills paid. Toiletries stocked. Lunches packed. Trash taken out. Birthdays planned. Doctor appointments scheduled. Medicine picked up. Clothes hemmed. Pets fed. Furnace filters replaced. Socks matched. Toilets scrubbed. I wrote it all. Then I printed 3 copies and placed them on the kitchen table. That evening, I sat in the living room with my tea while they filtered in one by one. Brandon arrived first. "What's this?" he asked, lifting the paper. "Your life," I said. "Everything I used to do that no one noticed." He skimmed through it, eyes wide, then shrugged. "That's a bit dramatic." Natalie walked in. Next. "What are these lists?" I didn't say anything. Michael arrived last. He glanced at the paper, picked it up, and sighed. "Is this really necessary?" "You asked what's going on. This is what's going on." He flipped through it, without reading half of it. "Look, I get it. You feel unappreciated. We didn't mean to take you for granted. That's the thing, I said. You didn't mean to, and yet you did. For years. Natalie sat down, crossing her arms. So what? Are you done being our mom now? No, I said calmly. But I am done being your maid. Brandon mumbled something under his breath, but I ignored him. I didn't make these lists to guilt trip you, I continued. I made them so you'd understand the amount of work that gets done in this house, or used to get done. I won't chase you to pick up your dishes. I won't argue with you to change your sheets. If you want clean clothes, learn how to do laundry. If you want a stocked pantry, go buy groceries. Michael leaned back in his chair, arms folded. You really think things can run like that? Chaos? No, I said. But I think it's time all of you learn how much of your lives have been silently held together by someone who nobody even noticed was falling apart. That was the last time we talked about it. The next few days were a disaster, exactly as I expected. By the following morning, the kitchen counter was covered in crumbs and empty boxes. The trash hadn't been taken out. Brandon left his clothes in the washer for 2 days and had to wear a damp shirt to school. Natalie missed her dental appointment because she forgot to set her alarm. Michael tried to cook spaghetti, burned the pot, and left the mess behind. I said nothing. Not out of pettiness. I was just done. But I wasn't sitting idle. While they tried to figure out how to live without me at their service, I was busy reclaiming my life. I started small. I went to the library, picked up a book I'd been meaning to read for years, and sat in a coffee shop reading it cover to cover. I signed up for a weekend ceramics class at the community center. I started walking in the evenings, listening to podcasts instead of my family's demands. I moved my things out of the master bedroom closet, not because I planned to leave, yet, but because I needed a space that was mine. I converted the guest room into a workspace and started sewing again, something I hadn't done since before the kids were born. I pulled my old machine out of storage and fixed it up. I bought fabric. I began making bags, pillow covers, aprons, and then something strange happened. I started selling them. I hadn't planned on it. I made a tote bag for myself, brought it to my ceramics class, and one of the women asked where I got it. I told her I made it. She asked if I sold them. I said I hadn't. She gave me $30 on the spot and asked for another. Within a week, I had 5 orders. Within a month, I was mailing packages twice a week. I never told Michael, or the kids, not because I was hiding anything, but because they never asked. It was ironic. They were so used to not seeing me, they couldn't even recognize that I was changing in front of them. One night, I came home from a walk to find Michael sitting at the table, staring at his phone. The trash was overflowing, and the kitchen smelled like spoiled meat. He didn't look up. Are you going to do something about that smell? I asked. He finally looked at me. This isn't working. What isn't? This. He gestured around the room. Whatever this is. You walking around like you don't live here. I live here, I said. I just don't live for you anymore. He shook his head. That's not what marriage is supposed to be. I sat down across from him. What is marriage supposed to be, Michael? Because for the last 20 years it felt like a service contract with no benefits. That's not fair, isn't it? He stared at me, then looked away. I don't know how we got here. I did, but I didn't say it. That night, I slept in my own room, alone, peacefully, and for the first time in a long time, I woke up without feeling like I owed anyone anything. What they hadn't realized yet, what none of them had even begun to suspect, was that I wasn't just changing routines, was building a life they weren't part of. By the start of October, everything inside the house still looked the same. Same walls, same furniture, same people, but something had shifted. Me. The others didn't notice it immediately. Michael was still waiting for everything to go back to normal. He kept thinking this was a phase, some silent protest that I'd eventually tire of. I guess he didn't realize I'd already been tired for years. I was just finally doing something about it. Brandon continued to ignore the chaos. He never saw the dishes stacked in the sink unless he needed one. He never saw the piles of laundry in the hallway unless he tripped on them. He spent his time locked in that basement cave of his, yelling into his headset, eating chips off napkins, and waiting for things to magically repair themselves like they always had before. Natalie, though, she started acting differently. It was subtle at first. She began coming home from school with an attitude that was less angry, more confused. I think she started realizing that I wasn't pretending anymore, that this wasn't some temporary punishment or emotional stunt. It took her a few weeks to really believe it, but one afternoon, as I was sewing in the guest room, she appeared in the doorway. "You're really not doing laundry anymore?" I looked up from the fabric. "No, I'm not." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I had to wear my gym pants to school today." "Okay," she stared at me. "You used to care." "I still care," I said calmly. "Just not in the same way anymore." She didn't know how to respond to that. She just turned and left. But she started washing her own clothes the next day. Brandon didn't adjust as easily. 2 days later, I found his clothes thrown in the living room. A load had gone sour in the washer. He'd forgotten about it for almost a week. Instead of washing it again, he left it all out to air dry on the couch. The smell was awful. I opened a window and said nothing. By then, I had gotten used to the stench of entitlement. Michael was harder to read. He stopped confronting me directly. But I started noticing things. Like him checking the mail more often, or quietly taking over the grocery list on his phone. He'd never shopped a day in his life, but now he was at least trying. His efforts were minimal, usually frozen pizzas and soda, but I didn't correct him. That wasn't my job anymore. And while the house slowly adjusted to my absence from the unpaid labor department, I kept building my quiet little world. My sewing turned into a full-blown side business. I created an online shop, simple at first. I posted a few listings, expecting maybe a couple orders a month. But by the end of the second week, I had 30 orders waiting. People wanted custom bags, table runners, apron sets, you name it. Apparently, the years I'd spent sewing Halloween costumes, school banners, and sofa covers had been a kind of training. I just hadn't realized it. I used the guest room as my workspace. Every inch of that space was mine. The table, the shelves, the calendar with deadlines, even the little bulletin board with customer thank you notes. No one else dared step. Inside without knocking, it was the first room in the house that felt like mine. Not shared, not borrowed, mine. One Saturday afternoon, Michael wandered by and peeked into the room. "You've been busy in here," he said, trying to sound light. "Have. You selling this stuff?" I nodded. "Yes." He looked at the fabric scattered across the table, then back at me. "People buy these?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him until he realized how that sounded. "I mean, that's great," he added, half-hearted. "Good for you." I didn't need his approval. I'd stopped needing it a long time ago. But it was interesting to see how quickly his tone shifted when he realized I wasn't asking permission. I never had. One evening, about a month after, my quiet rebellion began. I sat in bed looking at my bank app. I had opened a separate account for the sewing business. I didn't tell Michael. Again, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The balance was just under $4,000. I stared at that number for a long time. It wasn't life-changing, but it was mine. I earned it, thread by thread. No one else touched it. No one else knew about it. It was the first money in years that didn't pass through someone else's hands before reaching me. I began to plan, small at first. I started keeping receipts for every household item I bought personally. I separated my expenses from the joint account. If they weren't going to see my work, they weren't going to see my money either. I went through every cabinet in the kitchen and labeled the shelves, not to help them, but to make it easier for me when I eventually packed. I cleared half, the hall closet and boxed things I didn't use anymore. I even pulled out the old suitcase from the garage and cleaned it. Not because I had a departure date, but because I needed to remember I could leave. Some nights I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and ask myself what I would miss if I walked out tomorrow. It was a short list. Natalie. Sometimes, Brandon? I loved him, but the version of him in this house didn't love me back. Michael, the man I married, was long gone. What remained was a man who had mistaken silence for strength and obedience for love. One night, while I was finishing up a batch of orders, Natalie knocked on the door. She stepped in slowly. "Do you have a minute?" I paused the sewing machine. "Sure." She looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. "It's kind of cool in here." "Thanks." She picked up a small zip bag I had made. "This is pretty. It's going to someone in Oregon." She blinked. "Wait, you're sending this across the country?" "Yes. Orders come from everywhere." She sat down at the edge of the spare bed. "I think it's kind of awesome that you're doing this." I nodded, not wanting to say too much and ruin the moment. She hesitated. "Were you always this good at sewing?" "I guess. I just never had time to focus on it." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Is that what happens? You just stop doing the stuff you like because everyone needs you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "If you're not careful, that's exactly what happens." She looked down at her hands. "I think I was mean to you." I didn't respond. "I'm sorry." I studied her face. For the first time in months, maybe years, she looked like the little girl I used to tuck into bed. "Thank you," I said simply. She stood up, a little awkward. "Okay, I'll let you finish." After she left, I just sat there. My hands were shaking slightly. That apology, small as it was, cracked something open in me. Not everything was lost. Not yet. But I also knew I couldn't count on them to carry me forward. If I was going to move, it had to be alone. And I was almost ready. By mid-November, I had made a quiet decision. I didn't circle a date on the calendar. I didn't write it down in my planner. But I knew it. It sat in the back of my mind, fixed and clear. I was going to leave. Not in a fit of anger, not in some dramatic walkout. I was going to leave the same way I had lived for the last 20 years, silently, efficiently, without asking permission. The house was running like a machine with missing parts. No one knew how to repair anything, and they barely tried. Michael still ate fast food 5 nights a week. Brandon's clothes smelled like mildew. Natalie had learned to do just enough to survive, but she still left dishes in the sink and expected someone else to handle them. No one noticed that the bathroom light had burned out and I didn't replace it. No one noticed that I stopped contributing to the grocery fund or that my name had been removed from the shared calendar. They were used to my absence now, just not the kind that was permanent. That month, I started researching apartments, small ones, studios, a 1-bedroom, over a bakery, a converted garage unit 3 blocks from the library. I visited a few during my lunch breaks. I never told anyone where I was going. I opened a P.O. box. I set up a forwarding address for my business orders. I rerouted packages. I changed the billing info on my website. Quietly, I was separating myself from the address that used to be mine. Then, I found it, a small second-floor unit with a view of nothing special. It wasn't charming. It wasn't bright or spacious or particularly pretty, but it was clean, private, safe. And it was mine. I signed the lease the same day I saw it. I paid the deposit with money from the sewing account. Not a cent of that money had come from Michael or the kids. Every dollar came from me, from work they never saw and effort they never appreciated. The lease started on December 1st. I had 2 weeks to pack, so I started. At first, I told myself I'd only bring the essentials: clothes, sewing machine, laptop, a few kitchen things. But the more I looked around the house, the more I realized how little of it I actually wanted. I didn't want the framed wedding photo in the hallway. I didn't want the coffee mugs Michael bought years ago with cheesy sayings. I didn't want the couch we picked together from a catalog when the kids were toddlers. I didn't want anything that had been shared, debated, or used to placate someone else. I boxed up my sewing materials first, carefully, methodically. Then my clothes. Then a few favorite dishes I'd bought on clearance years ago and never used because they were too nice. I packed in the mornings before work, in the evenings, after dinner, always when the house was quiet. I stored the boxes in the back of the guest room closet. No one noticed. No one asked. Brandon didn't say a word. not even when the Wi-Fi bill didn't get paid on time because I removed my auto debit. Natalie noticed that the fridge was bare and asked if I'd forgotten to shop. "I don't do the shopping anymore," I said. She paused. "Right." Michael remained mostly silent. He didn't argue, didn't ask questions, didn't fight. He existed in a state of stubborn denial. I think he truly believed I would come around eventually. That one day I'd snap out of whatever phase this was and go back to being who I used to be. He was wrong. One night, just after Thanksgiving, we sat in the living room. Not together. He was on one end of the couch, scrolling his phone. I was on the other, folding an order of tote bags. He looked up. "You're really going all in on that sewing thing, huh?" I didn't look up. "Yes, you making good money. Enough." He nodded slowly, then went back to his phone. That was it. No further curiosity, no pride, no support, just that single passive remark. And somehow, it said everything. Had started disappearing from their lives, but none of them had the courage to ask why. That Friday, I took the afternoon off work and picked up my keys. The landlord handed them over without ceremony. Just a manila envelope, a signature, and a brief handshake. It was uneventful, but inside, I felt something settle, something that had been restless for years. I had an address. I had a key. I had a plan. I rented a moving van for December 1st, just a small one. I told Michael I was doing a vendor event for the shop and wouldn't be around much that day. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell him what I was actually moving. That night, I sat in bed, running through my checklist. I had everything. The only thing left was how to tell them, or whether I would tell them at all. I thought about leaving a note, something simple. "I'm gone. I needed to save myself. Don't call." But that didn't feel right. I didn't owe them closure. But I wanted to see the truth on their faces, just once. I wanted them to look around the kitchen and realize the cabinets didn't fill themselves. I wanted them to stand in the laundry room and see the baskets overflowing. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had lost, not just hear about it after the fact. So I made a decision. I would tell them after I left. December 1st arrived quietly. I woke up early, before anyone else. I loaded the van while the sun came up. I carried the boxes one by one. No help, no interruptions. By 8:30 a.m., I had cleared the guest room, emptied the closet, packed my sewing gear, and filled the van. I stood in the kitchen one last time and looked around, the crumbs on the counter, the unpaid bills, the silence. Then I locked the door behind me and drove away. I moved in that morning. It didn't take long to unpack. The apartment was small. I put my sewing table by the window. I set up my laptop. I folded my clothes into drawers that belonged to no one else. At 4 p.m., I sent the message, group text, Michael, Natalie, Brandon. "I moved out today. I'm safe. I won't be coming back. Please do not contact me unless it's urgent. The rest, you'll figure out." Then I turned my phone off. That night, I sat on my new couch with my feet up, a bowl of soup in my hands, and a blanket that smelled like lavender. The quiet felt different here. It wasn't the silence of neglect. It was peace, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The first message came the next morning. "Michael, are you serious? You just left? Like that?" I didn't reply. I had turned my phone back on for one reason only. In case there was a real emergency. Something serious, a car crash, a hospital call, a situation that, in a functioning family, would actually require my help. But what I got instead was panic dressed up as outrage. "Natalie, Mom, what is going on? Are you okay? What do you mean you moved out? Brandon, did you really leave the house? Like for real? So now what?" They didn't ask where I was staying. They didn't ask if I was safe. They didn't even ask if I needed anything. They just wanted to know what was going to happen to them. I turned the phone off again. That weekend, I woke up without an alarm. I brewed coffee just for me. I sat on the tiny balcony of my new apartment and listened to the traffic. There were no demands, no laundry baskets, no one asking where the phone charger was. I didn't realize how much of my identity had been shaped by managing other people's chaos until I removed myself from it completely. On Monday, I checked my phone again. 27 missed calls, 15 messages from Michael, 10 from Natalie. A few from Brandon, mostly short and irritated. The house had started falling apart and they wanted someone to blame. Naturally, they chose me. Michael left a voicemail that I played with the speaker on, just to hear how his voice sounded now. You can't just abandon your family. You didn't even talk to me. This is not how adults handle things. You left without a word, without a plan. It's irresponsible. You need to come back so we can fix this. I deleted it. Slowly. There was no we anymore. There hadn't been in years. He just hadn't noticed. That week, Natalie showed up at my job. I work part-time in the administration office at a local community college. Nothing glamorous, but it's stable and it pays what I need it to. She walked in just before lunch, caught me completely off guard. She looked the same. Ponytail, hoodie, headphones around her neck. Like she'd just come from class, or rolled out of bed. Her eyes were tired. "Hi," she said. I stepped out from behind the desk and nodded toward the hallway. "We can't talk here. Come outside." We sat on a bench outside the main entrance. It was cold, but quiet. "So, you really moved out," she said. "I did. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened?" She looked down. "Maybe. I don't." "No, that's why I didn't," I said. "Because for the last few years, I've tried talking. And every time I did, I was either ignored, dismissed, or laughed at. I didn't laugh at you. No, Natalie, but you didn't hear me either." She didn't argue. Instead, she said, "Brandon's freaking out. He doesn't even know how to boil pasta." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "And Dad?" she added. "He's acting like you destroyed the family or something." I looked at her carefully. "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it was okay." There was a long pause. "I miss you," she said quietly. That hit something, but I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't yet. "I miss you too, but missing someone doesn't fix the damage. And it doesn't erase what happened." "So what now? You're just gone?" "I'm living my life, that's all. For once, it's my life." She picked at the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "Can I come see you sometime?" "You can. If it's to visit, not to fix, not to convince, just to visit." She nodded, stood, and walked away. She didn't hug me, and I was okay with that. The following Friday, Michael sent a long message. "I've spoken to an attorney. If this is permanent, we need to discuss division of property, bills, legal stuff. Let me know when you're ready." It was the most honest thing he'd said in months. I replied, "I'm ready. Send me the contact info." The silence that followed felt louder than any of his past shouting. That weekend, I packed the last of my personal things from the house. I had asked Michael to not be there. Natalie let me in. Brandon barely looked up from his screen. I took my books, the rest of my clothes, a few framed photos that mattered only to me. Everything else I left, the furniture, the dishes, the towels, the decorations, all the things I'd picked, cleaned, arranged over the years. They were theirs now. Let them deal with them. Before I left, I walked through the house one last time. The laundry room was overflowing. The fridge was nearly empty. There were dishes in the sink that hadn't been touched in a week. I didn't say goodbye. Back in my apartment that evening, I stood in the doorway of my kitchen and looked around. It was clean, quiet, peaceful. I opened my laptop and checked the sales page. 10 new orders. A woman from Wisconsin had messaged asking if I could do a custom apron for her granddaughter's birthday. I smiled and typed back, "Of course, I'd be happy to." I was finally using my energy for something that gave back, not drained me. 3 days later, the divorce papers were in my inbox. Standard terms, nothing surprising. Michael requested we split the house profit 50-50 when it eventually sold. I agreed. I didn't want to fight. I wanted out. Natalie visited the next weekend. She brought a small box of tea and a bag of oranges. We sat on my couch, legs folded. like two women figuring life out. Brandon never reached out. Michael sent one last message the day the papers were finalized. I didn't expect this from you. I didn't respond. Because maybe that was the problem from the start. They never expected me to be anything except what they needed. And when I became something else, something for myself, they didn't recognize me anymore. But I did. And that was more than enough. 6 months after I left, the house was sold. Michael texted me the listing link short and cold. Offers came in. We accepted one. You'll get your portion next week. The house looked strange in the photos. The realtor had staged it, obviously. New curtains, clean counters, decorative pillows that didn't belong to anyone. It didn't look like the home I had cleaned, cooked in, cried in. It didn't even look like it had ever been lived in at all. Just another shell being flipped to the next buyer. I closed the listing and never opened it again. A week later, the money arrived in my account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to clear the last of my credit card debt. Enough to rebuild a bit of savings. Enough to let me sleep at night without rehearsing every financial decision in my head. I celebrated by buying a new kitchen table. Small, round, just 2 chairs. Mine. It was the first piece of furniture I ever bought that wasn't debated, compromised, or picked with someone else in mind. That spring, I started getting invitations. Not from Michael or Brandon, but from Natalie. Coffee shop here. A bookstore event there. A late lunch on Sundays. She started texting me more. Sometimes just to say hi. Sometimes to tell me about her classes. Other times to send photos of something she cooked on her own. She was learning. Slowly. Quietly. One afternoon, she arrived at my apartment with 2 bags of groceries and said, "Teach me how to make that lemon chicken you used to do." So I did. We cooked. She listened. She chopped the onions too thick and burned the rice slightly. But she tried. That was all I had ever wanted. Someone. To try. To notice. To show up. She left that night with 3 containers of leftovers and a scribbled note of the recipe. The next week, I got a photo of the same dish, better plated, next to a text. Not as good as yours, but close. Brandon even ate some. I hadn't heard from Brandon since I left. Not a message, not a question, nothing. Part of me held on to that. The other part had already let go. Michael and I spoke only through legal documents. The divorce finalized without any disputes. No dramatic court appearances. No custody battles. We had nothing left to fight over. He sent a final email when the paperwork cleared. "I hope you're happy. This is what you wanted." I never replied, because he was right. It was what I wanted. Not the divorce, not the distance, but the space. The room to breathe. The right to exist without being drained dry by other people's needs. My sewing business kept growing. I partnered with a local shop that started carrying my items. I opened a booth at a monthly artisan market. People started recognizing my logo. I received messages like, "I got your apron as a gift. Can I order 2 more?" Or, "Your bags are the only ones I use now." I didn't need awards. I didn't need praise. But each message reminded me that I could still give, just not to people who didn't see me. One afternoon in June, I received a letter. No return address. I opened it carefully. It was from Brandon. The handwriting was messy, the ink uneven. I recognized the tone before I read the signature. "Mom, I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. I guess I was mad when you left. It felt like the floor dropped and none of us knew what to do. I kept expecting it to blow over, like every other thing in our house. You'd get tired, you'd fix it. That's what always happened. But you didn't come back. And after a while, I started seeing why. The house felt cold, empty. And it wasn't because you left your stuff. It was because all the things we didn't notice were gone. All the things you did. The trash didn't take itself out. The bills didn't pay themselves. No one checked in on anyone. It was like we'd all been sleepwalking and you were the only one ever awake. I still don't know how to cook anything real. I still mess up laundry sometimes, but I've been trying. I got a job, part-time at a repair shop. It's nothing big, but it's mine. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for not seeing you, for acting like it was your job to hold us together. I get it now. Brandon. I sat with the letter for a long time, not crying, just thinking. He didn't ask to see me. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said the one thing that had been missing from that house for years. I get it now. That evening, I pulled out a note card and wrote back. Brandon, thank you for the letter. It meant a lot to me. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to stay awake. Keep going. You'll be okay. Mom. I mailed it the next morning. I didn't ask him to visit. I didn't invite him to dinner. I didn't reopen old wounds. I just let the door unlock. A little. A few months later, I received an email from one of my regular customers. She was organizing a local makers showcase for women over 50. She asked if I would speak. Not just sell, but tell my story. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I had anything worth saying. But then I thought about it. I had built a life from scraps, the same way I had patched together fabric and thread. Nothing fancy, nothing viral, just steady, deliberate work. So I said yes. The night of the event, I stood in front of a small crowd. I told the truth, not in dramatic detail, not with bitterness, just the facts. I left a house where I wasn't seen. I started a business that came from something no one ever cared about. Now people buy what I make. They say it helps them. That's enough for me. Afterward, a woman in her 60s came up to me, tears in her eyes. She said, I haven't left yet, but I think I will now. That night, I walked home through quiet streets, holding my coat closed against the wind. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous, but I was free. And for the first time in my life, the silence I lived in wasn't a punishment. It wasn't loneliness. It wasn't the weight of a family who couldn't see me. It was peace. Real peace. Earned, not given. And I wasn't going back. Not ever again.